Okay, we're now recording. Um, One thing that I want to acknowledge is that 1 hour is a very tight amount of time to incorporate good content that might be useful. Also, we've got a broad range of skill or knowledge um, backgrounds in this group of people, and there's a lot to balance. So just keep thinking about like, would you like more time? Should we expand it to offering more sessions or maybe just specifically networking sessions or some, I think different things could be on the table. All right, I'm going to share my screen again and dive into why passive first and some practical tools for integrating these strategies into a design and or build business. And then I'll go through those. Let's see. I'm going to try to get through that in about 20 minutes so that we've got a decent amount of time for discussion at the end. All right, passive first. Why focus on passive? It might be obvious to everyone here on this call, but it's kind of the lowest hanging fruit within the whole scheme of sustainability strategies that exist. It has the easiest sell associated with it. There's a real economic value that can be realized and validated and proven. Um, we're going to talk about what actually drives the cost of construction, a little bit about operational versus embodied energy or emissions. We talk about it in terms of embodied, but it's really the emissions that we're trying to curb. And then how you can integrate and document early into the process and why that's valuable. Um, Reed, I'm going to pick on you a little bit or call you out because I know we've had this discussion multiple times. Like, how do you validate the financial input or the financial value of this? Um, so I did a little bit of research prior to our meeting and looked back at my passive house tradesperson course just to see if I could find any resources in there. Um, there's there is a lot of data out there. I just did a search on ChatGPT um, and came up with like several different websites to look at exactly the upfront investment that someone might have to pay. And in addition to the payback, I think that we need to consider the payback just as much as the upfront cost. If a owner is a developer and their goal is to flip the building and sell it right away, it's a harder sell. But there is a lot of data out there that there's going to be, depending on if you're going, like when we're talking about high performance, there's this whole realm of what it could be. It could be building to a higher code. It could be building to a net zero code. It could be net zero ready, or it could be all the way to passive. Um, and just to be a little bit clear about what passive is, if you're talking about like passive house as certified by one of the organizations, it's to be able to operate on a very, very, very minimal amount of energy, um, a fraction of the energy of what a typical building would take. Um, and Reed, you asked about specifically like apples to apples verification of operational data for different building types. I think I'm interpreting this correctly. Please tell me. I know you were looking at this nonprofit kind of institutional building that maybe kind of compares to a school. And it's hard to find those. Um, and I don't know that I'm able to answer the question exactly that you're asking, but I'm thinking that maybe together we could come up with another way to get it to apples, or maybe it's the way that where the question is being framed or thought about. There might be a different way to communicate about it. Um, I think an important factor in this conversation of why is it the low hanging fruit? Why is there this financial incentive? It's like what drives the cost of construction in any building? It's a little different for residential versus commercial versus institutional. That's totally true. But these 6 factors, and really it's five, um, are are pretty much the drivers, right? Like the location and the market that you're building in. And then within that, like the specific exact location, whether it's a sloping site or a flat site, things like that. Obviously, the size and the complexity. Those of you who are builders on this in this group, like you understand that better than anybody. And then finishes don't get that much attention or credit for how much they influence the cost of construction. And performance is in there, but it is pretty minute. And we'll look at a study from the National Home Builders to validate that. And then when we're looking at like, okay, there is a little bit upfront cost for performance, improved performance. Design and planning absolutely has the potential to eliminate that upfront cost. Um, I bet you all have some stories to talk about design eliminating the cost of some complexity or planning, communicating with the construction team. And if you want to share any stories about this at any time, please feel free to just speak up and share it. I'm going to speed through a few of these graphics that I found online, just kind of identifying and validating that list that I found. I really could not find any graphics that broke out performance or insulation or air sealing. But, and these two, actually, I'm going to come back to these two. I did find in this, this is directly on NAHB's website, construction cost surveys from 1998 to 2004. So it's pretty up to date and they have a lot of data. I've been involved in this affordable housing discussion within the state of Idaho and hearing a lot of contractors talk about how building codes and building regulations, especially updated energy codes, are driving the cost of construction up significantly. But if you look at their own data, the cost of insulation in 2024, even with improved codes throughout the nation, it's still 1.6. Like that's not dramatically different from what it was in 1998. 1.6% is comparable to lighting and plumbing fixtures. And then just to validate the role or that planning and engineering and these upfront sort of soft costs, 1.5%. Like it's pretty minimal. So I don't know. I hope that can help to validate that like this is the low hanging fruit. It's not expensive. Um, and then we're not even talking about the different types of delivery methods, right? Like design build, CM, I forget what they're all called, CM, construction manager at risk, design bid build. Any of us who practice an integrative design process realize that it's a little more front loaded. And so some of the cost gets transferred to that front load of the process. But in the end, because we've got more cost estimates done early on, we see it prove more effective in the end at saving costs. Does anybody have anything they want to speak to about that? Have you experienced that in real life on your projects?
I can speak up and say that I was working on a house, am working on a house here in Tucson, and we were intending to do a design build partnership, and that fell apart early on in the project. And so it by default became design bid build. And so my fee had to change. So that there's going to be more time and effort on my part. So it wasn't necessarily that the house price was going to change, but for me, for professional services, I needed to renegotiate the contract.
Well, Lotus, you run a design build. MFGR, you guys are design build. Any thoughts on that from things that you've seen?
I can speak to that a little bit. Um, I am currently learning more about like the formal contractual differences between design bid build versus a integrated design process with a builder.
Mm-hmm.
I have only GC'd a handful of our projects because of having a child. Sort of shifted my ability to do that. But I think the potential is there, and I'm really excited to more formally contract design build and shift the risk of the project to the design build team as opposed to the owner. I think that that's something that is overlooked, that we don't manage well when the owner is uninformed and also responsible for coordinating that design bid
Mm.
process.
Yeah, that's super interesting. MFGR, anything you guys want to share about that? All right, I'm gonna.
Seeing it like kind of real time right now, where it seems so obvious that there's that last chart is really interesting to see that. Like we're talking about how we haven't been planning enough up front, and we're forced to be reactive instead of proactive. So we have a couple projects that we ran through really fast. And then when we were thinking about doing design build, it seems like it should be obvious returns on efficiencies and just ease throughout the process.
Mhm.
Um, which we feel like we're kind of fighting an uphill battle, but then we have another couple projects that we're starting that we're really trying to push hard and plan accordingly up front. And we're already seeing it. We're seeing it be easier already, and we're just like digging foundations and just way early in the process. And it feels like there's going to be some definite benefits to it. But it's hard, and I mean in the industry in general, just to like be able to plan appropriately and have all the decisions ready, like when we have winter coming and we have to move fast or whatever all the other variables are. But
Yeah,
I mean that's our goal, and we're working towards that. Like every day right now.
totally. In my own life, I have noticed that. Um, I mean, just one simple example is like switching from 2D design to 3D design. The 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 upfront cost or process of building a 3D model as your design communication tool in the schematic design process is like so much more effort than just sharing 2D drawings with the clients. It's so much more effort, but then in the end producing the construction documents is quite a bit more streamlined. And I think that that is exactly just another, like, it's a parallel to integration of either high performance or reduced embodied carbon strategies. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about operational versus embodied carbon. This graph is not necessarily totally accurate because when we see a lot of high performance buildings, the embodied energy often goes up, especially if we're building like an all foam super high performance envelope. But in theory, what what I am working on is trying to help us as an industry reduce that black circle as well as reduce the red circle. And I'm not going to go into it too much, but like if we're if we believe that we have an opportunity to reduce climate change risk with reducing emissions, we can't just do a reduction of operational energy. There's too much volume of buildings that's getting built. We have to reduce the embodied carbon as well. Um, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the beam tool. I can't remember if I mentioned that in the last presentation, but I love the beam tool because it's a super quick, it's free. You can just download it. Um, you can donate to the organization if you want. Super quick and dirty carbon calculations. I love doing it for comparisons up front. And the the people who developed that, Builders for Climate Action, did this study showing that they studied 4 different buildings. One was a multifamily, and they did a high embodied carbon envelope and a low embodied carbon envelope. And they did a single family building, same strategy, high embodied carbon, high performance envelope, kind of a code level building in terms of performance, but lower embodied carbon emissions. And this just shows that like the materials really make a difference. You can build the same building and actually store quite a bit of carbon. Um, in reality, that's a pretty hard thing to achieve. Even the best architects aren't yet actually able to achieve um, carbon storage in a building, but in theory, you could do it, and um, we're being able to get closer. Early integration absolutely is the key. Um, it's the lowest cost way to integrate these strategies. Um, Lotus, can I pick on you a little bit more because of like we work together at Love Shack, and um, I'm gonna actually share this slide. I shared this diagram on the right. I think you did this work, Lotus, for a dormitory building where we integrated our value engineering options early into the process within the framework of the envelope. So I talked about this a little bit last time, but I'm going to go into it a little more depth here. Actually, Lotus, why don't you talk about it if you're up for that?
Sure, no problem. So remind me what the tool is called again. I don't know if that really matters.
Design
Uh,
PH and Beam, both of those. Yeah.
Say that again.
Design PH or
Design pH.
yeah.
Yes, thank you. So Design pH is a tool developed with PHI that kind of translates directly into a like the PHI standard for a pass house building, and you using SketchUp can assign, and this plugin, you can assign different assemblies to your different elements of your building, and then it allows you to see the performance metrics just by running this plugin in a really simplified massing. And it's really effective to just see like when you switch out like one uh, insulation material for another, or one the depth of a material, or the depth of a floor, or the depth of a roof or something, and you get this just like kind of immediate um, feedback. And then you're also looking at windows and your heat gains and heat losses. So you can see in that tiny little red building, like whether you have glass in that gable or not changes the performance of the building pretty significantly. So it allows for just kind of quick and dirty feedback that can help to justify the selections at that early stage, and then you know a lot sooner kind of where you're headed. So it's fun too. it's just like kind of immediate gratification, which we don't get that much of.
Yeah, it's a design tool. And I know that AI is going to facilitate us with tools like this left and right, not too long from now. Um, um, are there any other like early phase energy modeling tools that any of you have used that you have found successful? That's okay. If not, I've really only used Design PH, and one of my goals is to research other tools. Um, I know that there are a lot of them, and it's hard to navigate and figure out which ones are best. So I would like to be able to provide you all with more resources than just Design PH, but I think that's a pretty easy, like low cost starter one. The cost of SketchUp is, I don't know, 150 or so dollars per year. And then to do an energy model like this, um, when Love Shack was first doing it, we'd probably spent a week on one. But after we figured out how to really do it, we could do it in 8 hours. Um, and then alternatively, here's an example from real life. Um, I am working on a design of a small straw panel building. Great, we're starting with a low carbon envelope up front, but I want to verify my work and design um, understanding. And instead of doing the energy modeling myself, we're already hiring someone to help us with the mechanical system selection and sizing. And so he happens to be a person who can do energy modeling for us. So we just received a proposal. The energy modeling portion of it was like 2.5K. It's a pretty small residence, but I'd say that's pretty typical for one of these consultants for a residence that's like 1,500 to um, 4,000 square feet or so. It's not going to be dramatically different. Um, and that's a cost that I have seen over and over in my career that's going to pay for itself in 5 years. And so that's a pretty easy sell to a client that just spending a little time in the early phases is really going to um, make their lives better in the long run. Um, in addition, this particular consultant is going to take on the load of walking the contractor through the air sealing. I don't have to bother with it. He's going to do that. Um, and then the last thing I want to talk about before we get into discussion is design language. The design language of a passive building is probably, well, let me change this. The design language of a passive, high performance, low carbon building is going to be a little different. Um, Jeff, as a developer, have you realized or experienced that in your projects as a developer and as an architect?
Uh, in which sense? In that can you
Like,
repeat the question? Sorry.
yeah, like, have you noticed that your design, like before you were doing passive designs to now that you are or were, I know you were at some point in your career, and I know it's fluxing as your career evolves, but I guess I'm just asking, like, can you talk a little bit about how the design of a passive building might be a little bit different from the design of a conventional code building? Not the process, but like the outcome. And I might not be explaining it clearly enough, so um, I'm happy to answer my own question if I need to.
Yeah. I mean the process we went through was maybe a little unique, and I think that because it wasn't like the one that the example project I'm going to talk about wasn't single family. I
Yeah,
think that there's there is a as you know, like a kind of a threshold that when you get a certain number of density, you actually don't have to have as thick of envelopes. And so what the assembly that we used was fairly standard, right? It was Zip R10 with cellulose insulation to get like a R27 wall with like very little, was trying to make it as dummy proof as possible. And so that aspect of it didn't make it that much different from standard construction from an assembly standpoint. The other parts, like the mechanical systems, were a little more involved. You still have to air seal. The air sealing is something that I can say that contractors are woefully behind about, no matter how much you point and detail. Um, the workforce is unskilled. I don't, and oftentimes doesn't speak English as a first language. And there are ways that can be beneficial. Doesn't mean that they're not good builders, but communication has been a big problem, at least on the East Coast. I don't know how it is kind of throughout the country, but even if they're in, no matter how well you do, yeah, I guess detail or put the drawings on paper, a lot of them may not speak English as the first language, and so it's difficult to communicate air sealing to them,
Yeah.
even if it's drawn well.
Right.
So it might be different from your question, but at some level, um, it trying to make it as easy as possible, but even doing that, drawings and universal languages don't always come through when it comes to a skill that just the workforce doesn't have. Air sealing is still something that, while it seems simple, um, and it's like discipline, really, that you can't get them, you can't watch them when you have, what ends up being like tens of thousands of square feet of surface area. They have to like really be on top of it, and it's difficult to watch them.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's a big challenge. And you're right. Like, even if we do our best to create a really beautiful, robust set of drawings that clearly communicate, like, the people actually doing the air sealing are not looking at the drawings most of the time.
They often do not even get, yeah, the actual person, labor in the field does not even have access to drawings. They
Yeah.
don't have them like there may be, even if there's a set on site, they're not looking at it.
Right.
Um, and even if you blow up details, I mean, I can say that trying to draw them as simply as possible, when you really try to showcase like overlapping, air barrier, materials, they definitely do not understand what those mean.
Right.
I don't know if that's been addressed and if there's a better way of dealing it, even if you do color, coded drawings, which rarely translate into the field anyway. If you want to draw your air, your thermal, your water barriers, like it's not going to actually show up in color in
Yeah.
the field.
Right.
Um, but I think, to me, like, without getting to like all the other things that could be possible, like that is probably like the biggest barrier of ensuring like what is considered maybe like the simplest thing. Again, the thing that shouldn't be that difficult, but because it takes effort and discipline and a GC who has to then stay on top of their workforce to air seal, that might be one of the things to try to plug as a whole, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Jeff, I got a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you ever do mock-ups of the full wall and roofs on the property, on the site. This is something that was more common in Portland when I worked over there. They were building full wall assemblies with all the, at least the heads of the crews. And they'd have to just disseminate that information. But then they could have something they could look at on the property that, I don't know, maybe something worth. I think that's a good way to test things out, make sure they all come together. Take some investment to figure it out up front, but it could be a good way to make sure it's done right, potentially.
It is. I think a lot of the multifamily work I'm doing, like they just, uh,
Yeah.
sure, if we as a developer paid for that, I'm sure that they would do it. We've spent more time doing mock-ups on windows, so like I felt like the window sealing and install was covered really well, but like all the other unique intersections, wall to ceiling, or foundation to wall, that wasn't mocked up. Doesn't, and if we can do it, that is a great idea. I know we do it like the larger institutional projects. I've actually always been amazed that, I'm sure you guys know Kieran Timberlake, their office is full of like these full scale mock-ups of like the things they've done. And I wish I had the budgets to work on that, but it's worth pursuing. I think that's a good suggestion for me.
Any other ideas or strategies that you've come across that can help with that challenge?
I would sort of echo the mock-up thing, but I think to Jeff's point, it's only the projects that tend to be at scale where you have $100,000 to $200,000 to put that together, and you still only have 3 or 4 people on a envelope crew that see it when unless everybody on that crew is there when it's installed, it's pretty hard to get those integral layers and the nuances that they have to everybody that's going to be installing it. But I think it's been the most effective way to get that translated across. It's beating your head against the wall to make sure that everybody sees it at the different phases before it gets covered up.
Has anybody used Arrow Barrier in any of their projects? It's not common in.
I have actually, but
Yeah.
it was, and if I don't want, if someone else has like, you can jump in with your experience, but I actually have used it. So um, it was a weird process. It was hard to sell at scale because of just the way they had to do it. And you had to be set up perfectly.
Mhm.
And so I think we actually only did it on this particular project because we had a difficult, it was because it wasn't a single family, I use it for a single family as like a one-off, and I think it worked better. But to do a multifamily, like the number of times they had to set it up, we only used it because we had one kind of, party wall that we had to make sure that that was sealed really well.
Mhm.
Where the other stuff, it just didn't seem like it was going to translate into like setting this thing up, like and moving it like unit by unit, 80 times.
Yeah. Fascinating. Kirby, were you gonna say you had used it?
Yeah, we're planning to use it on an upcoming project for a historic building that we're trying to achieve LEED Platinum with. And it seemed like the most cost-effective way to get the kind of air sealing rating that we're going for some of those lead points. So haven't done it in practice yet. We'll see how it goes, but we're excited to try it.
Awesome. So it sounds like from Jeff that maybe it's a little more well suited to like a smaller building that's not so compartmentalized. Am I reading?
And this one's
Or
open multifamily. It's like stripped down to the studs, and then we're planning to do couple inches of insulation on the interior, and then do the air barrier process after that. So
It seems like.
I would,
Go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, I would say like, yes, I think from a new construction standpoint, it seems like, and again, like doing infill in Philly where like you're tearing down, like there's two existing party walls and you're building up against them. It's always difficult to build against that. I don't know if anybody else, it sounds like most people are kind of Mountain West. I don't know if you have a lot of infill work you're doing, but the way Philadelphia was built with row homes, like everybody shares like that brick wall in the middle. And so like that thing is like notoriously hard to air seal, when you tear down like the infill, like the actual frame in between it. And the way they were built, it was like the joists were like pocketed into the brick. So again, they're like it's very difficult to seal. And so like that was one of the applications for air barrier because it actually made a lot of sense. And I think they quoted us like at a scale to be like $3,000 like for one home, which again, like the cost for us to air seal all of that would have been like astronomical.
Yeah.
The amount of labor. So I think that it worked. I thought on like limited applications for multifamily because I didn't see the value in, like kind of like the more traditional wood frame that's open and accessible. But when you do against a party wall or Kirby, it sounds like maybe if you're doing a historic renovation where, again, it may be a masonry wall, maybe
Yeah,
something
it's old
that,
masonry.
yeah,
Yeah,
difficult to air seal all that without like, really just gooping up something. And that's kind of what it's, aerosol sealant
yeah.
effectively. It's like this like spray can that just like spins around, and they say it's safe to inhale. I was always concerned that you step in there and it's gonna like coat your lungs, but it's supposed to like aerosol and then like like coalesce, on the surface and create this, almost like a silicon, bubble.
It seems like it has potential to be kind of a small amount of a material that is kind of an unknown. Like, I don't know if we know the pros and cons of it environmentally or health wise, but it's a relatively small amount of material, especially when you're carrying, like, considering like the volume of spray foam that is typical to use as air barrier. Um, with it kind of resolves some of those problems that we were talking about in terms of communication and strategizing, like in getting the membrane layers incorporated and overlapped properly. Um, a couple other things I just want to touch on here because I've.
And to
Go ahead, Kirby.
just to touch on Alex's point, we did evaluate hempcrete for it as well. That would be a good solution to seal it. The thing we ran up against was cost is one, but also just the added thickness of the wall assembly to achieve the R value we're targeting. And then the added weight on the existing structure is why we didn't go that route, but it would be a great application in the right building.
I wonder about plaster.
That's it.
Plaster is a great air seal if it's done properly. Can be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that's a bigger conversation. Um, just let me touch on these couple last things and we're gonna skip to discussing hopefully some more meat of like what your goals are and how we can um, achieve those things through this 6-month series. Um, I want to touch on the thicker assemblies thing just because I've seen as a consultant architects bringing drawings that are fairly designed already and they're very thin assemblies, especially the roofs. The roofs are really challenging. Aesthetically, we often like the glass like going right to the bottom of the soffit, or the eave, and not allowing head height for that insulation at that connection. Um, I always start designing with a pretty thick wall. I start with like 18 to 24 inches and a thick roof as well. And then at least I have options within that to narrow it down based on the assemblies that we end up choosing. Okay, if I switch topics to covering the things that I saw in the spreadsheet, a lot of people put their goals in there, which was really great and helpful for me. A lot of those goals, well, let me do this overview first. There were 4 things that we could go over that folks have infilled in terms of their engagement, 4 things that you can do to be a more sustainable company, and then the frameworks for incorporating some of this into your office procedures. And on the goals side of things, this is what I read and summarized. It seems like networking was kind of a big one, cross-pollination, inspiration, hearing new voices and solutions and stories. I think that this is one of the things that I want to, when I had the idea to create this group, it felt like this could be one of the greatest outcomes of it. And I think I could use your input on how we can maximize that more while balancing getting the CEUs. let's talk about that just a little bit, I guess. Um, would folks be open or appreciate having like maybe an intermediary additional session that's just conversation time? So we could meet maybe twice a month?
I think it might be nice if we had like an online community that we could continue to interact with,
Mm,
that was a bit easier. So yeah, where you could always just join and chat and talk and share, just a place to meet that's not like a total time suck like Instagram or something. You know what I mean?
yeah. Any ideas on what we could use for that?
Circle. There's another one called Mighty. And it's just nice because if that's hosted, you could, have some control over that, over the conversations, but it also gives everybody a chance to connect directly as well as connect, with each other and publicly and share things that worked and share things that didn't. So I just think that I knew like from the beginning, like that was something that I wish we had.
Awesome. That's a great idea. Any other thoughts?
It just dropped into the chat. So it was April who was talking about the nonprofit piece. And we recently won a grant with some partners in Michigan, brought a team together because we don't have a nonprofit yet. And it's brought up some interesting conversations, some stickiness, some challenges about a fiscal sponsor, which is pretty common arrangement, versus a partner who actually holds the nonprofit, and then coming up with teaming agreements that align to the goals of the group.
That's fantastic. Congrats on the grant, by the way. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to add is that, like, I feel like one of the hardest things in this whole discussion is small firms feeling like they have to do everything, because I do think like a traditional build to a sustainable build is not apples to apples. And so we have to think of things comprehensively because just adding sustainable choices or, uh, you know, carbon friendly choices just increase the budget. And then we're trying to like push that mountain or like push that rock up the hill of like trying to, convince somebody of the value that we're adding. Whereas like more, comprehensive planning, as you say, and as you touched on, can mean, less just adding and more like sort of just exchanging, right? So I might add in one place, but I'm taking away in another place, and they may not even be connected. So at the end, even if you have like a slightly more expensive budget, and when I say slightly, I mean like 20 or 25%, and you have a result that is in line with the client's goals. And when I say that, I don't want to go like off the rails here, but um, clients want a result. That's what they care about most. And that's what like the conversation has to start and end with. And then I feel like the things that we want to do to make it more sustainable need to kind of be something that just affirms them and wanting to choose, the design. So, yeah. So anyways, like what I was thinking of with the community even is that I think it's a really hard thing that we all have to feel like we have to do everything. Whereas I think something that I was hoping for was to um, connect with people who want to just get good at one thing and then share that. You know what I mean? Like even if it's and I think it should be, like paid exchanges of knowledge, right? Ways that we can, because now there's no need to be local anymore. So just being able to rely on other resources from somebody else who's decided to like focus on maybe one thing or getting really good at one thing and then leaning, on them for that. It just means that we learn well, I think, more quickly, and we're able to sort of still create the result we want, but without waiting till our whole team is like up to speed. We have all the knowledge. We're to the place where we can explain that knowledge, share that knowledge in a way that we could teach and train contractors, like all those things. It's just such a huge task.
Yeah, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like having a network of resources in humans that are practicing and specializing
Yes.
in these things so you
Yeah.
don't have to take on the learning curve and the um that's one of the hugest barriers. Um
Yes.
I think that our group right here, small as we are, has some potential to offer that a little bit.
I think so too.
Yeah, most of us probably are trying to do all the things, especially the designers and builders. Um, and just general as an architecture firm, like there's so much that you have to do and know. Um, but Alex is a hemp expert, and um, Lotus, you have more experience with Passive House, honestly, than I do. Jeff, you obviously have a lot of experience with Passive House. I'm just listing off some things that come to the top of my mind right now, but I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not sharing immediately. Someone could be really great at designing, integrating details, or MFGR. Obviously, like when I think of you guys, I think of you as super, super elevated design and integration of materials and fabricated components. Um, and most every building has some need for that. That's definitely like I am strong in that in some ways and weak in that in others. So being able to lean on you for that sort of thing could be helpful. I think, anyways, we could start a database. Um, and the contact sheet is like very just basic of that. And there are other networks out there that I think we could tap into as well, like the Bio-Based Materials Collective, the Natural Building Network, or Natural Building Alliance, um, California, like so many of them. Almost to the point that it's going to get to be like too many. But if we could try to keep it like bite sized and approachable for us, it could be beneficial. Um, let's see. Um, some of the other goals were how to lead a team in sustainability strategy. Paige, that was yours, I think. Um, and do you want to talk about that just a little bit in this group and share your
Sure, I
experiences?
think that's like a really broad goal. Like it should be parsed down into like sub goals probably because that's like we were just talking about, it's like tackling all the things when it should be maybe focused. And the main priority I think that I have right now, and the reason I said this is because I want to lead my firm in updating our assemblies, our standard wall assemblies. I feel like we've been doing the same approach for years and years and years, and it works as far as like the R values, but it's not responsible. And I want to like look at each of the individual material layers that we're implementing, but it feels daunting when um, we don't really like make a lot of time for research, and also we don't hire consultants very often in the vein of sustainability. It's more so like building science that we do. So I feel like I'm just like at the beginning of wanting to do better with our assembly specifically. And I thought this would be a great resource to uh, learn from other people.
Yeah, I think defining better assemblies is one thing, but then actually getting your company to integrate them is a whole other can of worms. Um, does anybody want to speak to that from this? Like, what feels like the bigger challenge for you, Paige? Like the integration or identification and definition?
Um, Maybe I just think that not bigger, but just the first step is like feeling solid about the standard assemblies because I've done some research on like what I would like to do, but I don't feel comfortable implementing it until I get maybe like a consultant to like say, yes, that's the right strategy in your, environment. I know that, I don't know, it just feels like weird to be the guinea pig. Like, let's say I have a new project and I have an idea on what I want the assembly to be. It feels, I guess, scary to be the first one in my firm to like change our standard assembly. So I think I just wanted to, I don't know, be able to survey what other people are doing and see something that's like tried and true because I do think specs are ever changing, and I'm sure a lot of people use different things. But sorry, that's my son. He just announced he has to go pee. But yeah, I just have to start somewhere, and I've done some research, but I think it's scary taking the leap to feeling comfortable before it even gets implemented.
Anybody want to respond to that? I have some thoughts.
I
Lotus,
mean,
you're
my,
nodding your head. Or
I was just going to say my approach has been just to ask lots of questions. So like trying to find the balance of highest performance and an assembly that aligns to cost. I actually went to some of the prospective builders and I just assumed that staggered studs were going to be more expensive, significantly more expensive. And he said, actually, we can make that work, 2x4s and 2x6s, and get a higher performing wall instead. And I was like, great. So just continuing to ask those questions, and 475 has been a great resource to be able to reach out to them. And I guess for me, the big piece is like setting the goals right from the beginning, to talk about how much to what do we want to exceed code. If we're not going to hit passive, how, to what does, like 50%, do we want to put a number to that? Air sealing, is building science corporations 1.5 or 2, is that good enough, or do we want to go all the way to passive? And just kind of just drilling down on it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different lenses to be looking at. It's cost, absolutely, like you said, Alex. It's also our value, which I feel like there's lots of different ways to achieve your goal, whether it's like a certain percentage above the code requirements. But then there's also just like I guess, the carbon footprint of the materials individually. Like, are they responsible materials? Um, so it's just, I think it's a lot to assess. I know, Kirby, I was just gonna pick on you. You work at High Plains, and I used to work there a very long time ago. Do you guys still do like SIP assemblies only?
Yeah, from a SIPs, and I'm trying to get them away from on some of the historic stuff of using a lot of foam. Seems to be the most immediate approach. But yeah, trying to get more natural based materials in there. But comes with its own challenges as well.
Totally.
Cost
That's
being the biggest initial one for some of the remote towns and
yeah.
getting that kind of skilled labor there. So.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one for us too, is trying to get away from foam because we just like usually lean on spray foam in the cavity, and there's lots of other options, of course. I've recently also like learned about more of like an open vapor assembly, which is newer to me, and I'm very interested in it. But it's one of the, I guess, a scary approach to be the guinea pig on, like I said.
I would reiterate 475 building supply is they have such a wealth of resources, details, and then if you are specing one of their products, don't tell them I said this. I think maybe I've said it before, but they will do a free woofie model for you so that you can understand and verify the water management risk
That's very
of
cool.
that assembly. And then I have, in your market, I'm sure you have a range of types of clients, but bringing in like Building Science Corp or some other envelope consultant might actually could potentially fly on some of your projects just to
Yeah,
validate.
yeah, I definitely want to, and I've been, I guess, researching who that would be best. I think I would love to get that resource from you, Lindsay. But I think we would maybe pay for it as a firm just to like update our standards as a whole, and if we happen to be able to like bill it to like a specific project, great. But otherwise, I think it's just a overdue thing that we need to do. So I also was looking into a company called Emu out of Colorado, and I don't know if that's the best fit. I know they really focus on passive house, but we're really looking to update our assemblies to be better performing, but also be responsible with materials. So I just have to find, I guess, the right fit for who that consultant would be. We've also like worked with Kath Williams on a couple projects in Montana. She was great, but yeah.
It sounds like you're on the right path.
Green Insight out of Fort Collins is another consultant I'd recommend for kind of a third party high performance
Do you guys mind
verification.
putting all these names in the resources page?
Yeah, that would be so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And you too, Paige, Kath Williams. Please put her in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll put EMU. I saw, I just like clicked on the link that you had, Lindsay, for that natural building convention in Bozeman on the 18th, and EMU is one of the sponsors.
great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it is 6 after 5. Yep, that's right. And I want to let everybody go, but it seems like I had some nodding heads, so I'm gonna go ahead and schedule us a networking meeting intermittently, and we'll record those two. And maybe I'll just schedule it for 45 minutes, and then people can stay on and talk as long as they want. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your input and ideas and thoughts and feedback. And if you have any other feedback or things that I didn't touch on that you would like to see, or ideas of how this could be improved, just email me. I would love to hear it. I imagine, this is just the first 6 meetings of something that can become much different, bigger, better. All right.
Thanks,
With that,
Lindsay.
thanks everybody. I will
Thank
see
you so much.
in a couple weeks.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.